Hi, and welcome to this presentation of the paper on digital transformation, governance, and coordination models, where we will present a comparative study and the results of it, covering Australia, Denmark, and the Republic of Korea. My name is Morten.
My name is Zoran.
And we will jointly present this paper. Digital transformation is a topic that I'm sure we all have researched in different ways. We will look at specific angles of it. Particularly, we will look at the role of governance and coordination models. But first, just let's summarize what the importance of digital technologies are in relation to the way that governments function. If applied successfully, it allows us to both be more efficient, but also more effective and provide both customer-oriented services, create more public value, and radically transform the way that the public sector operates and the way it designs and delivers its services. If successful, government initiatives when they use technology are characterized both by a shift from efficiency and productivity to one of governance. With governance, it means also an increasing focus on openness, transparency, and engaging with both the end user, the private and non-governmental actors in creating public value through service design. Keeping this in mind, it led Zoran and I and our colleagues to think of two specific questions. First, what is the role of governance and intergovernmental cooperation in the digital transformation of the public sector, and particularly when it comes to the production and delivery and subsequent use of these electronic versions of analog services we already know? And secondly, how has the approach to governance and high levels of intergovernmental cooperation and coordination boosted the digital transformation, and if it has so at all? Our methodology approach consists of multiple elements. We're using a classical exploratory approach to do qualitative analysis. We do in-case analysis to do a three-case comparison. We use an adopted version of a context, content, and process model that's adapted by Robert Krimmer for voting technology. We're using a combination of quantitative measures and services to try and benchmark the three cases as well. Our primary sources are obviously national policy documents, international statistical sources, but also other relevant academic research on the three countries, national, regional, and international references from, for instance, the United Nations, the European Union, and the OECD. We chose the three cases in terms of having a combination of similarities and differences. All three are high-income developed members of the OECD. They have similar levels of economic development. They have very high levels of infrastructure sophistication. They are all three consistently highly ranked on international benchmarks, both in terms of life expectancy, healthcare quality, educational attainment levels. They are also regularly considered as global frontrunners for public sector innovation, transparency in public services, in doing business, and in technology use. Now, naturally, it's also interesting to just refer to some of the differences in terms of territorial and population size, some of the political system variations, and cultural and linguistic traditions. Australia is, by comparison to the other two countries, geographically the largest. It is also the only federal country. It is Anglo-Saxon in its approach to government and the public sector. Its urbanization rates are very high, amongst the top in the world, and it has a top 10 GDP per capita. But Australia is by territory the largest, meaning that large proportion of their country is got low population density, while urban areas are very high. Denmark, by comparison, is relatively small. It is highly centralized. It follows a continental European tradition, both legally and in terms of public administration. It has a highly devolved set of local authorities. Although by European standards, it has a relatively low population density, but by Nordic standard, it is high. Urbanization levels are also very high. In comparison, Korea or South Korea is again relatively small by territory compared to Australia, but it is more similar to the size of Denmark. Population density is higher than both the previous two countries and is primarily concentrated in the lowland areas, but also in the north around the capital of Seoul. This is just a table for those of you that are interested in a little bit more precise information, where we have some of the key information on territory, density, official languages, GDP, unemployment rates, etc. But please feel free to refer to this at a later stage. We're now going to turn to the building blocks of digital transformation, and I'll hand over to Zoran.
The internet use and access and digital literacy are the main preconditions for any digital transformation. Statistics show that all three countries are among the most connected in the world with high rates of internet use. The investment in highly sophisticated fixed and mobile broadband infrastructure, the expansion of fiber optic and other networks supported by appropriate legislative and regulatory measures, boosted the internet penetration rates and established a ground for successful digital transformation and digital economy development. When it comes to the digital foundations, all three countries are early movers. Strategically, all of them adopted their first ICT strategies in the late 90s or beginning of this century. Even all of them operate in a different context, all three countries have followed a similar path towards successful digital transformation, but obviously with a different timing. While their first strategies were focused on the development of platforms for online service delivery, the last strategies are focusing more on an integrated way of service delivery and improving the whole of government ecosystem. Namely, all of them have focused on issues like creating reliable infrastructure, digital literacy, institutional capacity building, digitization-ready legislation, rollout of key enablers like digital ID and digital signatures, establishing platforms and websites for online services, interoperability, and systems developments for back-office efficiency. Besides, all of them strategically move towards eliminating the paper-based communication channels and establishing full end-to-end digital services through implementing the digital by default principle associated with opt-in or opt-out mechanisms. Functionally, the governance model and institutional capacities for intergovernmental cooperation and coordination are among the key factors for the successful digital transformation and the functional whole of government concept. Having in mind the different socioeconomic context and history, as well as different strategic approaches and focus over time, all three countries have adopted different governance and intergovernmental cooperation models between central government authorities, local governments, stakeholders from the private sector and the civil society. However, their institutional setup is similar, having dedicated institutions and bodies that are responsible for the strategic development from one side and operational specialized digital transformation agencies or departments that are responsible for implementation of the national and sectoral strategies. Namely, in Australia, the responsibility of strategy and policy development lies in the Prime Minister's office, while Denmark and Korea have delegated this function to the ministerial level and designated national committees for ICT. On the other side, Australia and Denmark have specialized national digital transformation agency, such as the Digital Transformation Agency in Australia and the Agency for Digitization in Denmark, while Korea has separated these responsibilities among different institutions and bodies, mostly between the National Information Society Agency, the Korean Internet and Security Agency, and the Government Bureau within the Ministry of Interior, etc. At the implementation level, steering models also differ in the three countries, but in most cases it is the responsibility of the government agencies and the local governments, coordinated by the specialized national body or the National Digital Transformation Agency. What is crucial and the most important is that all three countries ensured proper coordination and cooperation mechanisms with the participation of all levels of governments and the other stakeholders from the private sector, civil society, NGO, and in all institutional levels. The coordination and cooperation model, as well as the formal and informal public-private partnerships, is one of the key factors for maximizing the benefits of the digital transformation and public service production and delivery.
One important element to add to what Zoran was saying is the degree with which the three different countries are using and formalizing collaboration between levels of government. So on the one end, we see that Australia does coordinate with all levels, but that strategies and decision-making forums mainly include actors from the central government or federal level when they design these things. In Korea, we see even greater entrenched cooperation in a formal sense between local and regional authorities. And uniquely in the world, we believe Denmark has joint development of strategies in consultation with all levels of government. The Joint Steering Committee has representatives of all levels of government and so forth. So we see that there's different degrees of formalization of this collaboration in the three countries.
The availability and rollout of the e-government key enablers such as electronic identification, digital signatures, digital post, and other infrastructure components needed for a digital ecosystem for service production and delivery vary across the three countries. As seen in the table, the three countries have achieved significant success in the rollout of the key enablers. All of them have EID solutions and public key infrastructure necessary for a large scale of digital transformation and use of e-services, e-commerce, and e-banking. In addition, all three countries have developed platforms and channels for enabling digital communication with citizens and businesses by sending text messages, emails, digital posts, and various types of electronic communications that speeds up the procedures and increases the effectiveness of the public services. On the other side, the supporting technical infrastructure, interoperability, and exchange platforms vary among all of them. Denmark and Korea have established proper interoperability framework for exchange and reuse of data for public service delivery, while Australia is in process for establishing interoperable platforms for easy integration and exchange information. Also, the once-only principle is recognized and implemented by all three countries in order to avoid duplication of data and collecting the same categories of data for different purposes. Additionally, all of them have adopted and implemented special digital service standards to ensure a monolithic brand experience of the government websites and platforms, plus mechanisms for evaluation and measurement of the user's satisfaction. However, the mere provision of online service offers does not guarantee its use. Another important effect of the digital transformation is the take-up efficiency and the proportion of citizens' use of online banking, online purchases, and their level of interaction with public authorities online. Despite the data for the online interaction with the public authorities and use of e-services is available only for Denmark, the high ranking of Australia and the Republic of Korea on the EGDI 2018 shows that they are not far behind Denmark as a world leader.
As we're running out of time, we'll turn now to the conclusions and some proposed next steps for future research. Looking at the common features of the three cases in conclusion, we see the clear link between governance and institutional capacities when it comes to intergovernmental cooperation and coordination in all three cases. We also see that they have pursued different cooperation models across the strategic, operational, and institutional levels, but also when it comes to implementation. They have over time and are increasingly focused on whole of government concepts in this regard. We also see that over time they have adopted different strategic approaches and focuses, but there are common features and trends in all three countries. One of them is looking first at establishing infrastructure, back-end systems, later on technology use, online services, and lately whole of government. We also see that they all pursue models that include central, local, and regional authorities where relevant, as well as stakeholders from both the private and public sector. What also becomes clear from the analysis is that the three countries continue and put increasing emphasis on the importance of clear mandates and division of roles and responsibilities, not only in relation to the strategic level, but also on the operational and implementation level. We see that all three countries have taken approaches to establish clear coordination and cooperation mechanisms, both for escalation of issues, but also to clear or establish standards or develop enablers for whole of government or whole of society issues such as electronic identities, data exchange, and so forth. We also see that they all three look at consulting or cooperating across all levels of government and with stakeholders both from the private sector but also from civil society and NGOs. And again, this is across all the strategic, operational, and implementation levels. In relation to the cooperation and coordination, we see that both the formal and the informal partnerships and patterns are important in all three countries. Public-private partnerships are seen as an important factor for maximizing the benefit. The Danish examples of digital post and EID are elements here, but we see similar examples in both the Republic of Korea and Australia. Now, it's interesting to see that these three global leaders in digital transformation share a number of similarities in their approach to the digital transformation and how to facilitate this from the government's policies and strategies and action plans. But it is interesting to see that a number of these features seem to also occur in countries which have enabled or been able to leapfrog over the last 10 years when it comes to the application of technology in the public sector. If we look at the UNDESA biannual ranking, for instance, we see that countries such as Spain, the UAE, Liechtenstein, Bahrain, but also Russia, Uruguay, Kazakhstan have had strategic focuses, have central coordination, and have been able to catch up with the global leaders in the OECD countries and elsewhere. Again, governance and intergovernmental cooperation models seem to play an important role in these countries, but this is something that we would like to analyze further in future research. We would like to now conclude by thanking not only you, the audience, for your patience, and we hope that you found it interesting. We must acknowledge the different funding sources, so here's a slide on acknowledgement. But if you have any questions, please do not hesitate to contact Zoran or myself. Our contact details is on the final slide, so feel free to join us in this research or to ask us any questions.